Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 Nerds by Nerds, hanging out with
Ted.
And today it's time to set camp and your watch has begun.
If you want to jump down to the description below, sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get weekly gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So we had a viewer question, video suggestion, wanting us to talk about the watch from the Castellan.
Right.
And, essentially he wanted to know how we handle it. What do you do when it's interrupted? Do you involve penalties? So
Go ahead.
one of the things I went and did is I went back to the player's handbook and reread
The long rest.
the long rest and short rest, and it's only there's like 5 paragraphs total anyway, and it's on page 186 of the player's handbook. So, just by raw, one of the important things to note is a short rest is at least an hour, and you can take as many of those as you want throughout the day.
Right.
The long rest is different in the sense that it requires 8 hours, and you can't do much other than light activity, and actually taking watch is part of that light activity. So you can stay on watch for 2 hours. Doesn't affect you inversely. The problem comes in when something pops up during the middle of the night, and whether it's a combat encounter or if it requires you guys to do something vigorous or whatever. Technically there could be other things that are not combat that could pop up that could break your 8-hour rest, like an earthquake or severe weather or something like that. I feel like would be a disturbance.
Your campfire is not being attended, and the next thing you know, you've got a forest fire.
Yeah, things like that. So what the player's handbook says is, if your rest is interrupted, you must restart it. It's not even a matter of you extending it out. You don't benefit from the rest. So technically, as long as your long rest was at least an hour, they could receive the benefits of a short rest, but not a long rest.
Right.
And here's the thing, right? In your D&D game, this is the drawback of taking a rest someplace that isn't secure and safe.
Right.
This is why like those adventurers, like you always get that wonky player who's a ranger or barbarian. I want to sleep outside of the town and I'm going to save 3 copper, and then then they're the same person's going to be pissed off if you hit them with a random encounter and they don't get the benefits of their long rest.
Right.
So, with the Castellan, he wanted to know is is it just too tedious to disrupt their long rest? Do you hand wave it and just give it to them anyway, or do you come up with some kind of other penalty or I guess just a penalty?
And he also wants to know is how do you make them more interesting and more important to the game itself?
Yeah. So again, the mechanics are already there. Like, the penalty is you got a short rest instead of a long rest. And it depends on what kind of game you're playing as well. Like, if you're playing a game that relies heavily on randomness, then absolutely, like, random encounters happen during the night and you can be boned. And really, what this does is it's going to force resource management on your players. They might have to retreat to a town or a city. They might have to seek shelter somewhere. Well, you start whittling down their resources. These are all the things that can happen. Now, it depends on, again, like what type of game are you running. Some DMs use random encounters, but they're not really random encounters. They're just encounters that they throw out there.
Right. Now, the thing where this can really be interesting is if you're doing a mission or a quest that has timetables to it. And it can be a resource as a GM where you can allow your players to get the sleep that they need so that they're not exhausted, but it really can get into the resource management end of things where it's like, all right, you guys are constantly taking your short rests and you're getting some sleep, but you're being harassed by the weather or by your adversaries' monsters enough that you're not getting those long rest features back, so that by the time you get to the end of your quest, you're really dealing with the nickels and dimes of your character's power, and like, okay, I'm using cantrips, and you could put something that's a less powerful encounter that normally they would just be able to obliterate it if they had access to everything. But your druids, your druids out of wild shapes, your wizards down to, a first level spell and cantrips, and you're used to throwing lightning bolts and fireballs, and you don't have those.
Shocking Grasp and Firebolt. Dink, dink. Yeah, absolutely. Or, if you wanted to, for an adventure, I wouldn't do this all the time. I think it would get tedious after a while.
Absolutely, yes. This is something to do sparingly.
Well, no, I was going to go in another direction and go how many times can you not have a long rest before you do get levels of exhaustion and fatigue sets in? And granted, like it should be like kind of integral, important to the aspect of the campaign or story that's going on right now. Like, if you want to really illustrate how harsh an environment is, or the place that your players are trying to get through and how dangerous it is, and they're being constantly harried, where they can only grab the short rest and they can't get the benefits of a long rest, maybe they do start accumulating some levels of exhaustion. Maybe they have to use other resources to overcome those, like, for whatever reason. Maybe there's potions or spells. What's that?
Coffee.
Coffee, or the potion from the Dresden Files made off of coffee, that they start going through in order just to stay on their feet. Again, would I do this all the time? No, but maybe for a session, maybe there's a time limit. Maybe you're trying to really illustrate how hazardous a certain part of your world is, and you're not supposed to go there, and there's a reason for it. Because this place is just so nasty that you can't even get a moment's respite.
So, really, you're looking at those kind of angles. Number one, yes, according to the raw, if your sleep is interrupted enough that you have vigorous activity, your rest must be extended, or you just want to change it into a short rest. I know a lot of DMs out there, they just let it get extended a little bit because it's not worth the hassle to be like, oh no, let's by the watch, we have to look at it. You
totally, Cleric of Chaos is going to recommend that you just set up at this spot and let the monsters and loot come to you. By the way, but that's another factor, and the reason why I bring that up is because the sounds of battle might actually draw other creatures, other predators, other hazards. So, like, you might literally be like, okay, we had an encounter, we should probably pick up and move somewhere a little bit safer, especially if you're kind of like in a high encounter area.
And let's face it,
And you'll know this because when you enter it, there will be like the diamond-shaped sign. It'll say high encounter area. Maybe with a little monster on there.
Possibly. But if you're playing a more realistic game, the smell of the kill, because typically if you're fighting, you're not always going to drive things off. You actually have to kill it. That will attract other predators. So are you doing the nature thing of getting the carcass away from where you're resting? That's another factor.
Turn it into bait somewhere just down the road or something, so that it draws away the monsters and the animals.
You've got the ability to play it out where, all right, you can have this be a farming resource, as Cleric Chaos might say. It could be a situation where you're playing a game of resource management. You can ignore the raw and just not worry about the hassle of it, of just, okay, well, this happened, you guys finish your rest, however long that takes, and then you move on and you go about what it is that you're doing. Setting watch, doing the rest, as the DM running, it's your call what you want to do. If you're playing, as Dave says, a very random game where you're leaving things up to chance more often than not, or relying on what the dice say, then by all means, do what the dice say. The dice are never wrong. If you're playing a game that's designed for story reasons, then it's only important if you as a DM feel it's important. It's your call ultimately. You're the one running the game. I find that I use less encounters in my game to try and get more story into the time frame that I have allotted. And there's times that I wish I could add another hour or two in my day into my sessions for random encounters or just more encounters in general. but that's currently not my DMing style. So
Yeah, a lot of our games we've been run where they're kind of episodic, where like they're self-contained, where there may be a big overarching story, but at the end of the day, you go back to the base, the HQ, and when you start throwing in a lot of random stuff like that, it really is going to hinder that style of play.
and it adds time. We are running games that are a different style than what we used to do, and I'm used to a different thing now, and to try and put multiple encounters.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the only reason why what you're saying even matters is because we're running these games in this episode of Matter because we don't actually know who's going to show up for the next session, and like in order to not have to worry about that and getting people back to HQ, right? Then you're just like, all right, this is my block of time, finish to completion, end where you started. Kind of deal, right? If you can't accomplish that, then that means your next session is up in the air, as we've seen recently,
right?
And then you have to figure things out, and like we're at a stage in the game where we don't want to figure things out, and that's just a personal decision. So that's why we haven't used as many random encounters and added more encounters to the game that we weren't really anticipating, because after you play for a while, you know how many combats you can have, how many role-playing encounters you can have in a lot amount of time. When you add randomness to that, it completely changes everything.
Yes.
But if you guys are playing where that's not an issue and you don't care about that, you can absolutely do it. And you might go like, this area is a high encounter area or a medium or low, and you might create charts based around that. And then like your players will then learn about your campaign in a way like going, oh, like we don't want to ever camp in the Mountains of Misery because they're named that aptly because hey, you're going to be miserable. There is no place to sleep. You need to find somewhere else, somewhere safe. Or at the very least, someplace defensible.
Right.
Where in the Happy Hills, you can go there and hang out forever, and you can be there for like a 10 night or fortnight, and you probably may have one encounter happen.
With the fluffy bunny.
That
gets flowers.
So these are all things that take into consideration and keep in mind when you're prepping your adventures and planning your campaigns, because that's it too. Like you can kind of work these into your game nights ahead of time, right. And depending on what you want for that session, you can determine how Watch is going to work, right. Per se.
So how do you handle encounters in your game? What do you do?
How do you handle the Watch? It's the Watch.
The Watch. So my apologies. How do you handle the Watch in your game? What do you do to spice up those long rests? Put your comments down below while you're at it. Like, share, even subscribe.
You can patronize us in a good way over on Patreon.
So until next time, stay nerdy.